Let's go to our panel now. And Labor Party President and former Deputy Prime Minister Wayne Swan has finally apologised for retweeting a post criticising Jewish attendees at a Bondi vigil after first doubling down on his retweet, which accused Jews of hypocrisy for supporting Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu while booing Albanese at a vigil on Sunday. Swan now says he's reflected on the post, removed it, and is sorry for any offence caused. The apology comes after Prime Minister Anthony Albanese called the post wrong and said it shouldn't have been shared, as well as calls from Jewish leaders for Swan's resignation. Joining me now to discuss this is Institute of Public Affairs Research Fellow Mia Schlicht and former Labor MP and past chair of the Defence and Foreign Affairs Committee, Michael Danby. Thanks both of you for your time this Christmas Eve. Michael, this clearly seemed like a forced apology from Swan to me, and I should add a qualified one, because whenever someone apologises for offence caused, I can't help think that's the weakest kind of apology there is. And it also comes after, of course, intervention by the PM in the Jewish community, because Mr. Swan was clearly proud of his tweet at first.
Emotionally members of the Labor right, but they're reliant for their positions and their future on the Prime Minister and his dominant socialist left. So I think they're being more protective of the Prime Minister than the Prime Minister is himself, who said it was quite natural that people booed when emotions are so raw. And of course, Caroline, as you know, if Wayne had been down there like I've been down there or you've been down there, he'd know there weren't just Jewish Australians who were outraged. If he read the opinion polls, he'd know that it wasn't just Jewish Australians who were outraged. The Australian public are furious with the incompetent handling of this issue of anti-Semitism, as your brilliant senior counsel who just interviewed has pointed out over the last 2 years. You know, get serious, Wayne, and get down there and have a look and speak to people in Bondi.
Mia, do you think Mr. Swan's apology is enough, or should he still stand down?
No, it's certainly not enough, and I think he definitely does need to stand down. But look, we could talk all night about Wayne Swan's various failures. He was a failed treasurer. He has made woeful contributions to public life ever since. So there's plenty of issues in Wayne Swan's backyard that we could point out here. But in the reality, the problem with this tweet that was made is what it shows. There is a certain attitude of contempt within the Labor Party that has been allowed to brew. And Wayne Swan holding such a senior position in the Labor Party and still being allowed to keep that position after having such a terrible, terrible tweet, that just shows that. And it shows how much the left has changed, how much the Labor Party has changed. They've gone from having a leader like Bob Hawke, who worked incredibly well with the Jewish community, who was very well respected, to now having this new generation of Labor leaders who just show complete contempt for Jewish Australians at every turn because they don't serve their political agenda.
Look, it's not all Labor leaders. Here in New South Wales, we have, I think, a Labor Premier who really stands with the Jewish community, but I don't think you can have someone. Yeah, exactly. Like you, Michael Danby, but I think, it's shameful that this is coming right from the top of the party. Anyway, he's an outgoing Labor president now, so maybe they'll just let him hang on for the last bit. As I told viewers at the top of the show, security sources have accused the Albanese government of willful blindness and a permissive approach in responding to the rise of Islamic extremism and anti-Semitism in Australia, telling the Australian ministers like Penny Wong and Tony Burke had been briefed on the threat. Michael, this won't be a big shock, but it is unforgivable.
Isn't it worrying that a former senior national security official has to go anonymously into the Australian to warn the public about the fact that the ministers have already been warned on these issues? And it goes to your senior counsel's argument about why there should be a national royal commission. Communications between ministers like Burke, Wong and Albo with ASIO, with their departments, with the federal police, all of them ought to be subject of public scrutiny after this, only because, not to defend Mr Netanyahu as Mr Compton and Wayne Swan argue, but to prevent more Australians being killed in the future. We must have an investigation into this that is comprehensive and it attacks the mindset that our leadership have had. Every Jewish Australian has known that during the last 2 years, banning Israeli tourists, doing all of the other things, letting Gazans in, letting ISIS brides in, all of this is the salami tactics of a government that just doesn't understand these security issues, and that the security people have clearly pointed out to them, as that, I almost call him a defector in the Australian says today.
Mia, isn't it the case, it seems, that this is a key reason Albanese keeps refusing a royal commission, so that more detail on this willful blindness, as these sources call it, on anti-Semitism and extremism can't come under further scrutiny?
Well, I think you've hit the nail exactly on the head there. There is a reason that Albanese is so determined to avoid calling for this National Royal Commission, because he knows that mistakes were made along the way, and he himself has admitted that he could have done more. And I'm sure there are many more decisions that need to be brought to light of how we got to this tragedy in the first place. I think the most shocking part after the aftermath of this terrible, terrible incident is we've got a Jewish community coming forward saying that they are angry, they are hurt, they are upset, but they are not surprised. And I think as a nation, that is just a terrible outcome of this incident. And it's exactly why Albanese does not want to call for a royal commission, because he is more determined to protect his own job and to protect the Labor Party from any scrutiny than he is to protect Australians from making sure this never happens again. Because the issue of anti-Semitism, it is not just unique to New South Wales. I'm speaking to you from Melbourne. We have had protests weekly for the past 2 years, with protesters saying terrible, terrible things, with extreme ideology being allowed to brew, and there's been nothing being done about it.
Of course, Melbourne has been worse in some respects. And, obviously this attack could have happened there just as easily. Look, I want to get on to New South Wales passing these sweeping gun and protests laws in the wake of the Bondi terror attack. Here is the Premier a little bit earlier.
These are extraordinary measures, I acknowledge that. I know that not all Australians that live in New South Wales support these changes, but we have decided it's the best way of ensuring we do everything possible to keep the people of New South Wales safe.
Now, under the changes, registered gun owners will be restricted to 4 guns per person, although farmers and professional shooters can have up to 10. Firearms, which allow shooters to take multiple shots while reloading, will also be banned. And the reforms also restrict mass protests in the wake of a terror attack. Mia, I think it's hard to argue with these changes, and although gun reform isn't the main issue here, it is absurd that people in the suburbs of cities can own so many guns.
Yeah, sure. Look, I mean, there might be some merit to looking into some of the gun laws here, even across the country. But at the end of the day, this is a complete distraction from the real issue. And the Australian public can see right through this. In reality, all these gun laws will do, it'll make it harder for legitimate gun users like hunters and like farmers to get on with their daily business. But let's get serious. That was not what happened in Bondi. That was not the same situation. This is a government who is desperate to save face. And in doing so, they are going to focus on things like tinkering around the edges of gun laws and protest laws, so they don't have to talk about the real issue here, which is anti-Semitism, collapsing social cohesion, and the fact that we have some communities here in this country who hate Australia.
Well, I think the Premier, in fairness to him, has been pretty good. Like, we have had, obviously, the October 9 incident outside the Opera House, and he has committed to a state royal commission in the absence of the Prime Minister committing to one. But, Michael, what do you think about the protest laws aspect of this? There's been a lot of criticism on that from all the usual suspects. Like, they want to ban slogans like globalise the Intifada, and people say that's infringing on their free speech. But I find some of these protests that have been continuing after the attack just so grotesque.
Caroline, to some extent, they're band-aids to some of these measures, the slogans and the gun laws. But the Royal Commission that the Premier is holding is worthwhile in itself. But what I don't know is some of the federal government's apologists on the ABC have been arguing, able to call evidence from ASIO, from federal agencies to interrogate federal ministers, etc., because surely that's the issue. It's the mindset, it's the zeitgeist that has allowed Islamic extremism to have an important influence in Australia. That is surely the issue that's feeding this and the fear of future incidents. So I'm pleased that there's a Royal Commission. You've got a strong Premier from the old Labor tradition there, making the federal government look very weak by comparison. But the problem is, I don't know whether, and this is something I'm sure the many presenters and news people at Sky will investigate, is whether the State Royal Commission has the power to bring out all of these facts or not.